It'll probably come as no surprise to my listeners, but I've been a food lover my whole life. Like many, I grew up finding comfort in food. Obviously, I became a chef. But as I've gotten older, I realized that the way I was eating wasn't serving me anymore. And that's hard because I'm saying it in the past tense, and it's something I still have challenges with. I'm overweight and now a little bit pre-diabetic. But I want to feel better, move better, but also still enjoy the food that I love. It's always tough when you talk food, health, and nutrition, especially on a podcast, because it's so personal and everyone has different opinions and experiences. But when I saw what Arash Hashemi was doing, he's someone who has been sharing his recipes on Instagram for a number of years now and other social media platforms. I thought he's someone I'd like to have on my podcast. He has a new cookbook out, and we're also going to talk about his packaged line of low-carb, high-protein pastas and rices. Oh, and if you're new around here, this is Chris Spear, and you're listening to Chefs Without Restaurants, the show where I speak with culinary entrepreneurs and people working in the food and beverage industry outside of a traditional restaurant setting. I have 32 years of working in kitchens, but not restaurants, and currently operate a personal chef service throwing dinner parties in the Washington, D.C. area. All right, so this week I am joined by Arash Hashemi. He's the creator of the wildly popular Instagram account Shred Happens. And when I say wildly popular, I mean he has more than 4 million followers at this time. Arash is someone who, like me, has struggled with his weight. I think he was over 300 pounds at one point, and he just realized that it was time for a change. He started documenting his journey online, which eventually evolved into recipe creation and sharing those stories and recipes with the world. And as I mentioned before, he's also the founder of Kaizen Foods, which is a low-carb, high-protein pasta and rice made with lupini beans. I found that part of his story to be really interesting as well, especially about the R&D process, what it is about the lupini beans in particular, and just some of the challenges he's had bringing a product to market. So we talk about what it means to reframe your relationship with food, the psychology of snacking, and something that I find challenging, which is why preparing for breakfast might be the most important thing you do all day. Of course, we also dig into his debut cookbook, So Easy, So Good, which is filled with high-protein, low-carb recipes with a Mediterranean twist. So if you're someone who's trying to make healthier food choices without giving up flavor, I think you're going to want to hear this one. By the way, I have purchased some of Kaizen's pasta, and I find it to be phenomenal. Sure, it's not exactly like a traditional wheat, gluten-filled pasta, but I think it's a really good option. All right, let's get into it. As always, thanks so much for listening, and have a great week. Hey, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
Looking forward to talking to you today. We were just catching up a little bit. Sure, many of my listeners know a little bit about my backstory, but I'm a food guy. I'm a chef. I've been professionally working for 32 years in the food industry, and I've always self-described myself as a little fat kid. I mean, in the 80s, you were husky. That's my mom had to buy the husky clothes. And I was probably about like 280 pounds when I graduated high school and kind of hovered around that area for the past 30 plus years. So I guess we're jumping right ahead, but for our listeners, say we're going to be talking about healthy eating, changing the way you eat, the way you cook, the way you look at food, and your incredible story because you also were a big guy for a lot of your life. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels in the story that you just mentioned and your background. And certainly for me, I grew up on going on any diet imaginable. You name it, I've tried them all. Usually stuck around for a week or two, sometimes maybe a little bit longer, but they all ended up crashing and burning. I gained even more weight. I developed a more challenging relationship with food. And eventually I tipped the scale at probably closer to 350 pounds. I really stopped stepping on it at some point in my early college days. And luckily I was able to turn that around a little bit later.
What was it for you? Is it snacking? Is it the time of day? Is it calories? Like, do you have an idea of where your biggest challenges were that you needed to work on first? Because obviously so much of this is not just about food, but there's a psychology to it and a lot that goes into it. But looking back on it, where do you think your challenges were with how you ate?
Yeah, I think it certainly evolved over time and was probably different things at different moments. But I think, at its core, growing up, I grew up in an immigrant family. I was born in the US, but my family, my parents came here for my dad to get his doctorate degree here in Massachusetts. And so we eventually moved back to Iran when I was 3 years old. And at that age, I vividly recall not having access to the foods that are commercially available here in, I'd say, the Western world, really, whether that's the Dairy Queen or the Burger King Whoppers or the snacks ranging from the Mars bar to M&Ms and so on and so forth. And so when we were 10 years old, we moved to Canada together. And it was the very first time I finally had access to all these incredible things. And I'd been just held back so much from the days that I was watching Cartoon Network or whatever it may have been. And so it was really a free for all. And combined with the fact that, my parents were working really, really hard to just make ends meet. We moved to Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada with really nothing. My parents were working hard. My dad was actually traveling back and forth to the Middle East. My brother and sister, who were about 10 years older than me, roughly, they were working and they were going to college. And so food just naturally became my, comfort, if you will. And I think that's probably the biggest thing to answer your question in a very long way. It was really a sense of stability amongst just a lot happening and a lot of challenges and money issues and like that. And so it became a sense of comfort. I was eating the wrong things in the wrong quantities. And then I was being exposed to all these foods that I just didn't have access to. And so I think over time, that reliance became even more pronounced as the stresses of college came on, the stresses of the corporate world came on. And even to this day, I mean, it's really tough. Food is in many ways designed, mainstream food, to be, exciting and get your taste buds really happy.
So addictive. I love a crunch. There's something about like a Dorito. It's like this hard snap crunch. It's the salt. It's whatever those spices they put on there. And eating a carrot is not the same as like eating a Cool Ranch Dorito. Just whatever they've done to engineer that. It's like one of those things that like I just want to reach for.
Yeah, big companies spend hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars a year. They have dedicated R&D teams that come in in the morning and leave at night, focused on exactly what you just said. How do we make that crunch as satisfying as possible? They've probably spent tens of millions of dollars just on that crunch, right? Or on the spices and whether or not it sticks to your finger or not, and the aftertaste. And, some of these companies also have a number of different products under their portfolio. And so how do these kind of symbiotically work together to get you even more addicted?
The system is rigged against us.
It is.
And then there's a cost thing. I mean, going back to like a bag of Doritos, it's a couple dollars. Yesterday I saw on Instagram, someone was sharing a piece of swordfish and it was $46 a pound. And you're like, $46 a pound for a piece of fish that's healthy, or like $3 for a bag of Doritos. I mean, not that you should be eating a bag of Doritos instead of a protein for dinner, but there are a number of factors, and cost is one too. Eating healthier foods can be a lot more expensive than processed, refined, packaged goods.
I mean, even looking at the breakfast aisle, right? It's cereal, it's processed sugars and grains and dyes, right? And so, a box of cereal on the shelf is, $4 or $5, potentially even less if you go for a store brand. And then, especially with the price of eggs these days, it's really challenging to sometimes make that right call. And that's unfortunately something that we've really got to solve, both within the US and really around the world.
You didn't get into this in your book, but what do you do for breakfasts?
Yeah.
Because that's my challenge, like fast and going to hold me over for a while and something delicious. Do you have like go-to breakfast?
Yeah, no, a great point. And I love breakfast. And, while I love adventure for the kind of the middle and latter part of my day, for me, breakfast, what I've really nailed it down is something that keeps me satiated, full, and excited. It's really the foundation of my day. And one of the things that I really, found out later on was that if I am not eating a good amount of healthy fats and protein in the morning, I'm going to be famished as the day goes on. So what I typically do, I love jammy eggs or scrambled eggs really, but I love jammy eggs. I just take them out of the fridge, pop them into boiling water for about 6.5 to 7 minutes. That's my sweet spot. Have one, two, three, whatever, the right number is for you. I then just cut them in half. I put some salt, everything bagel seasoning. My favorite is actually chili lime seasoning. And then I have that along with maybe about half an avocado or some cottage cheese. I mean, if you have just that egg with half an avocado and some cottage cheese with that seasoning, I promise you, you are going to have an incredible day. It's going to keep you full, keep you satiated. It's not going to raise your blood sugar and then have it come crashing. So around 11 or 12 o'clock, you're not going to feel that, you want to take a nap. And it really pays dividends throughout the day. So for the
Three
most
eggs.
part,
You're gonna have to take out a second mortgage on your house for three
I
eggs.
just may. I just may.
So you're talking like a tahini spice when you say like chili
Yeah,
lime or
yeah.
something like
Tahini
that?
is
Yeah.
great. Trader Joe's has a chili lime
Oh yeah.
seasoning. Maybe Whole Foods has one, but yeah, they're relatively, widely available now. And, I love that. And, if you want a little bit of sweetness, a little touch of honey with that chili lime seasoning and the jammy egg goes well. But that's kind of like the foundation of what I do. And that really, that's what I do, I'd say 5 or 6 times a week.
Mm. Yeah, our day gets going. I have kids. I have 12-year-old twins. My wife leaves the house before they even go to school. So like, it's the scramble. I got to get them going. I got to get them out the door. I have to drive them to school. I come home and my
Yeah.
dog needs to walk. And it's like, if I don't eat before then it's like 9:30 and I haven't even had anything yet. And then I've got to get rolling with my day. And sometimes it's 10 o'clock and I haven't even eaten yet. And I know that's not a good plan and need to really be focusing on what that first meal of the day looks like for me.
Chris, what I'd love for you to do is maybe, and the nice thing is this should start to finish take less than a minute and a half. You can prepare, soft boiled, medium boiled, or hard boiled eggs, right? They take anywhere from 6 minutes to 9 minutes in boiling water. Put them in a bowl on the left-hand side of your fridge shelf. In the middle, just wash 2 or 3 avocados, put them right next to it, and have a tub or 2 of cottage cheese. And in the morning, I would just take out the number of eggs you'd like. I'd take out an avocado, slice it in half, put it on, take a couple of scoops of the cottage cheese, add your seasonings. 1.5 minutes tops. You have an amazing breakfast.
Mise en place. That's what we talk about in the food
There you go.
business, right?
There you
Having
go.
it all right. And I do think that, there's a lot to be said for people who meal prep and things like that, because I get it, because I get in the same thing at lunch. And, now it's like 12 o'clock. I got some stuff going on. I haven't planned anything. And then you're just like, what am I doing? And I think it comes down to, good planning. Was there a point in your life where you're just like, this has got to change? And like, how did you do that? Because it sounds like you tried a whole bunch of different things. So like what you're doing now, how did you figure out that was something you wanted to try, and how did you make that work for you?
And I've done different things at different times, but really the turning point was about my third year in college. And I was like, look, if I just, my self-confidence was low and things were just not going in the right direction. Previously, I'd kind of gone cold turkey with everything that I've done. I tried to do everything at the same time. And so I remember just, after looking at a very particularly bad photo of myself one day, I was like, look, I've got to get this right. This is going to be a life sentence of sorts. And so I started by just cleaning up what I was eating. At that time, I was eating a lot of processed foods, a lot of sugars, a lot of fast food. And so I started just buying the ingredients that I was using. And I did what a lot of people do, which is, I started, eating chicken and broccoli and rice and, hot sauce and salsa and all that stuff. And, I cleaned up really my diet. That was the first thing that I really needed to do. I didn't step into a gym. I didn't do anything other than just, hey, I got to clean up my diet. And I did that for about 3 months. And I started to just feel really good. Just a couple weeks in, it really paid significant dividends. And so then I started just gradually going to the gym. Before this, I would actually, the gym was never my problem. I was always doing some sort of activity and I enjoyed it. It was never really a chore. But I kind of incorporated that physical piece in once I had kind of dialed my diet back in. And I just focused on like how I would feel. And I still do this to this day because listen, similar to you, I love food. I mean, it tastes amazing. It's a great way to celebrate with friends, with family. It's a good way to unwind. So I'm wired that way naturally. And so, but I always think about, all right, how am I going to feel the next day? It's not even after, just how am I going to feel tomorrow? And so, if I'm craving something particularly, I'll have a little bit of it, but, it doesn't mean that I need to completely go overboard. which is what I was doing previously. But back to your question, I think the first step really for me was dialing the food piece in, then getting the physical piece in. And that was just me going, walking on the treadmill, doing some bike, very light weights. And, I lost a significant amount of weight. But then came the corporate world. And, as I was doing really well in my role, I was, getting promoted every couple of years. And with that additional responsibility came quite a bit of additional, stress. And, as I was kind of climbing the ladder, these kind of behaviors start to come back, the reliance on food, the shortcuts, the Uber Eats at night and the drive-throughs came back. And, that's when I decided, all right, like I've really got to focus on this. Otherwise I'm never going to get it right. And so that's when I decided to just really go all in terms of, becoming healthier. And, I think the big realization that I had this time around was, all right, like, I love pasta, I love pizza, I love burgers, I love fries, I like all those things that we all love
We
as
all love them.
Americans. Yeah, they're amazing. They taste great. So for me was, all right, how do I make healthier versions of this stuff so that I'm not feeling like that I need to cheat in a way? Because previously, anytime that I kind of set out for something, I always had this like pre-designated cheat day. And I was always like looking forward to that day. And so one of the things that I really wanted to change was that mindset. And so I really focused on creating healthier versions of my favorite foods. And, uh, that's ultimately where Shred Happens came into fruition. It was my quest to make foods an adventure, exciting, taste good so that I don't have to, you know, uh, look for a crappy version of a food to make it to feel better.
Now, what was your experience with cooking up to that point? Like, were you someone who was already kind of like a confident cook in the kitchen at home, or like how much self-education did you need to
Yeah,
be able to be creating these dishes? Because it's one thing to just like open a cookbook and follow a recipe, but then once you get into the recipe development, that's very different and not a skill set. I mean, a lot of people can't even follow a written recipe, let alone start
for sure.
modifying them to their own tastes.
Yeah, I'd say my cooking experience was limited to eating the food. And so, my wife likes to joke that, when she first met me, and this is a true story, so the joke is well deserved. Back in 2012, when I met her, I wanted to impress her. And so I invited her for dinner and I was going to make her steak, and I didn't even have salt in my kitchen. And so, she was very gracious and, ate it without really making too much fun of me. But I didn't really have a food background besides just really enjoying it. Now, I do recall I was naturally gravitating towards, when I was growing up, I remember like the summer of eighth, ninth grade, the Food Network. And so there was, Sarah Moulton and a number of different shows. Rachel Ray was on. And so I would just sit there and, watch these shows all day. And I was really just fascinated about, the cooking process and how they were doing it. I never really emulated any of those recipes. I just like enjoyed watching them as entertainment. And so I think that eventually later on in life became a good kind of starting point. But, I was just a regular guy. I didn't, have a great knowledge of spices or different produce or how things go together or even how to cook chicken. And so, a lot of my recipes when I started my account and even before that didn't look the way they do today. It's just trial and error and learning along the way.
You have an Instagram account that has 4.1 million followers. I
Hmm.
mean, just like how? I mean, like
Yeah.
that's stunning. Is that crazy to you that so many
Oh,
people are interested in what you're doing?
yeah. And beyond, because I think, so one, it's just an incredible privilege that I really don't take for granted. I'd say the bigger thing is the number of emails and messages that I get about the impact that I have. And it's just mind blowing. It really is. People who have someone who's diabetic in their family, son or a daughter who made one of my recipes and, they were able to have, a certain family favorite meal without spiking their blood sugar. Like those generally just hit me at my core. They are so meaningful and they get me so emotional every time. Or there was a couple particular instances where parents of kids who are going through cancer and are, on a low carb diet as a result, have written me just very, very long and heartfelt messages, and that just to me that's more important than any number of followers. And but the community has certainly grown to be very sizable, and that's a privilege. And it's still surreal.
It's great because it's something so many people are dealing with. And there's no one size fits all, right? Some people keto works well for them. Some people low carb, high protein works well. Some people this works well. And, you just kind of have to try a bunch of different things and see what works for you. I'm not someone who really buys into a lot of the fad diet. So I'm always looking for something like this that seems to fit with what I need. And, to be honest, I'm pre-diabetic and I'm like right at that number where, started a low dose of metformin. The
Mm,
doctor's like, we're going to see. And if we don't get where we need to be, like,
yeah.
there's always the injectables. And I really, listen, I'm sure they're great for people. I'm not at the point where I want to start on a Ozempic type thing or something, not knocking it. I would rather get to where I need to be through diet,
Yeah.
exercise,
Yeah.
lifestyle changes. And I'm really hoping that this book is going to be awesome for me because
I
that's
hope
kind of
so.
where I need to be. Is so
Yeah.
like when I got this book, it was great looking through it, and I've tried a couple recipes already.
Amazing.
So I'm really looking forward to like putting this into more full force. My big challenge is we have a family of 6. My in-laws live with me. They're
Hmm.
in the next room, so I'll be a little quiet. No, they can't hear me. They're in their 80s and they do not like healthy food. Like
I see.
when we do a tofu night, not
Yeah.
in. Ground turkey, chili, no, we don't like the ground turkey. And then
Yeah.
two 12-year-olds in my house who, I'm a chef and I think they have a pretty good palate, but particular. And, if it was just my wife and I cooking the way that we would want to, we'd go all in and cook all this all the time. And like finding that balance of like the things that a family of 6 are going to want to eat with very
Hmm.
diverse palates and preferences is tough
Agreed.
because I would just go in the pantry and throw all that shit out.
Yeah.
There's stuff in there that needs to go, in my opinion. So for me, I really need to work on some self-control because there are going to be some things in my pantry that
I'm
I
right there with you.
know are not good for me. So like finding that balance. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think just on this point, because I think that you hit on what I hope to have, my readers and my community walk away with, which is, we need to leverage some of the and take some of the marketing tactics from some of these incredible food companies, right? So, for example, you mentioned tofu, right? What if we, give it a fun name? You mentioned you had kids, give it a fun name, give it an exciting name that resonates with your kids. Plate it, cut it in certain fun shapes, or put it in certain type of bowl. Like make it exciting, make the presentation exciting, or perhaps the delivery or the experience. So instead of, hey, here's the final, like making it interactive. Hey, here's your base, here's your protein, add whatever toppings you want, different types of seasonings and sauces. Really, I think the more we celebrate and make things adventure and fun, because I think the reason why, and I speak for myself here, that I wanted to, get into those other types of foods that I know are terrible for me, yet they taste amazing and they're exciting, right? Is because they were made and marketed that way. You wouldn't know about them if they weren't marketed that way, with Splish Splash on
Yeah.
TV or on Instagram or whatever it may be. And so I'd say, that's exactly what I hope to do with this, which is at its core, healthy food can be incredible with the right spices, with the right sauces, with the right presentation. I'm not a chef, and I'm just a finance and accounting guy. And so, I try to demonstrate and present these foods in a way that makes it exciting. And I think that's the number one thing. And I think beyond that, it's about, how you plate it up, the type of utensils, the type of, presentation or the naming of it. Put some marketing flair behind it, and I think you might have a different experience.
Now, where do you stand on fat? Because I know a lot of cookbooks and recipes and things of this nature, you see a lot of like no fat Greek yogurt and, all this. But I notice you use like whole fat cheese and yogurts, and one of your recipes has heavy cream and things of that nature. So finding that balance, what is your take on fat and in your cooking?
Like, I think I use it all. I use, uh, cream. I use half and half. I use milk. I use almond milk. I use 2%. I use full fat. I use 0%. I think it it's what you're comfortable with ultimately. It's what are your goals? What do you like? If 2% yogurt is going to help you have in totality a healthier meal versus a 0%, go ahead with the 2%. If, you've got in-laws or kids or espouse that, they're just turned off by the idea of an almond milk or regular milk and they want to use cream. And if that allows you to have a healthier meal in totality, I'd go for what makes them excited. If tofu's not the right thing, have that healthy meal and use, I don't know, chicken or something else. So for me, I'm not afraid of fat. I think, it works for me. I don't think it would work if I was doing, moderate to high carbs and moderate to high fat. So something's gotta go. And for me, that's usually lower starch, lower carb foods.
Now, for you personally, were you tracking things like calories? I know, a lot of your recipes were talking about carbs, net carbs, protein.
Yeah.
Were you tracking calories, any sort of macros, any of that?
Yeah, initially I was at the beginning because I think for me, when I kick started, I was really mindlessly just like reaching for things throughout the day. And so the biggest thing that I needed to do initially, and when I mentioned, I didn't really focus on the physical aspect of it, I was focused more on, what am I putting into what are the calories coming in? And for me, journaling or writing things that I was using an app to just write down what I was eating and the calories. I had a certain number that I wanted to hit. And for me, that was really more in terms of taking inventory of what I was eating and also retraining my brain to understand because I knew if I was going to eat something, I had to write it down. And so that was my way of trying to understand just how often throughout the day I'm actually reaching for something, whether I was feeling anxious, nervous, bored, whatever the reason may be. And so that was my primary tool to just kind of reset. And anytime that I want to kind of reset again or just kind of kickstart something, I always revert back to that. And then things kind of go smooth sailing from there. But I always need like a initial period where I'm really focused in on it. But again, that's what works for me. For some people, tracking is, tough or challenging or it backfires. And so I think it's just a matter of figuring out what works for you.
Well, I think sometimes at the beginning, like portion control, like just like what is an ounce? I don't think a lot of people even know, right? When it's like, oh, an ounce of cheddar cheese has whatever. And you're just like throwing handfuls on. It's like, oh, well, that was 3 ounces. Like maybe you thought it was like 1 ounce and just kind of having some ideas to like how much that stuff is. I think a lot of chefs can relate to the multiple tastes of things to kind of like I say, just like a whipped cream, right? Like I'm making a cake and I need whipped cream. So it's heavy cream and sugar and you whip it in a bowl and you taste it and you maybe have like a tablespoon. You're like, oh, that needs more vanilla. And you add more and you whip it and you taste it again. It's like, oh, that's good, but it needs a little sugar. And then you do again. You just had like 3 tablespoons of heavy cream and
Exactly.
sugar. It doesn't make you satiated. You're not like gonna then not eat
That's
a
right.
meal because you had it. And just like that compounds over the day. You work 8, 10, 12 hours a day and you're doing that with multiple things. That's an easy recipe to throw on calories, fat, not good stuff throughout your day that's
You bet.
not even helping you get more energy or feel full or anything. It's just like throw them in the pile of extra calories.
Yeah, that is a big struggle. I'd say, the licks, the spoons, the tastes, the nibbles, those add up, especially for somebody like me that's in the kitchen quite a bit. I mean, even for the average person, as you kind of go through a recipe, as you do everything that you just mentioned, I mean, that could be 2, 3, 400 calories right there. And so, and if you're making multiple recipes, it really does add up.
So you literally quit your job to focus on this. Is that right? Like you stopped working to kind of focus on your health and the cooking and all this?
I quit. Yeah, I mean, I quit my career, and so I
Yes.
was in finance and accounting, and so I just looked to my wife in 2017, late 2017. I said, "Hey, I've got to just you know do this." We lived a very comfortable life, and had kind of achieved the American dream and success, if you will, and as people like to look at it, but. And I was, I say this in the book, I was, a leader for others, but I really realized that I wasn't being a leader for myself. And so I, went to the CFO of the company at the time that I worked at, and I was like, hey, I'm kind of, deciding to leave. And like, oh, what are you doing? And, I was like, well, I got this business idea. And they're like, now they're like really intrigued. They're like, oh, what is it? And I was like, oh, I can't really talk about it. And the truth is, I didn't envision this, right? Like, at no time did I envision writing a cookbook having a, high protein, low carb pasta and rice company, having follow, 4 million followers on Instagram. It never really, I never imagined this. When I quit because I wanted to change my relationship with food first and foremost, become healthier, and I just trusted that it was all going to work out. And I had to make very significant changes on our end to kind of make up for it. We put our house on the market. I started renting out my car. I started flipping things on like eBay and selling anything extra in the house. And then after that was done, going and kind of finding things and flipping them, going to yard sales. I mean, I was doing the Gary V thing.
So you
If
got the
anyone
Gary V,
listens to
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So I was, really doing anything to make it work. And, it, a lot of the people, and by the way, at the beginning, the people that I used to work with, I didn't start an account right away, but, when I did, a lot of the people or I didn't really tell anybody about it. And then slowly people started to find out about it. And, they kept asking me, for example, well, what's the plan? Like, are you monetizing? Are you, making money? Like, why did you, like, when you come back and, and so like, I just trusted that it was going to work a lot, work out over time. And it was very
And
tough. It was very tough.
And I mean, things, it's gotten easier over time, like with the technology and iPhones or whatever to kind of create recipes. But I'm sure if
Yeah.
back then it was a little more challenging. What's that evolution been like? Like, were you sharing full recipes? Were they, now you've do this
Great point.
video recipes in the comments, there's a lot
Yeah.
more. What did that look like when you were starting? Or was it just like kind of a personal, like, here's my journey of cooking?
Yeah, so it certainly evolved. I mean, my ride or die since the beginning has been my iPhone, and that's what I use until to this day. But yeah, it's evolved. And so at the beginning, there was a lot of static posts, right? Instagram has evolved into more of a video platform.
Sure.
And when I started, it was really more static photo based. And so that's where my strength was initially. And then TikTok came along in early 2019, I believe. And, my wife, Madalena, was really pushing me to, get out of my comfort zone and really start getting on TikTok and creating videos. And, believe it or not, I was very apprehensive and like very just shy. And so I created a TikTok account. I was one of, very early to the platform. And I think I didn't really show my face until I was like, I may have had like 500,000 followers by the time I started showing my face. And so, but had I not adopted that new platform, had I not evolved as a brand, so to speak, I would have been left out in the dust. And so, I think Instagram was great that it started with static. It gave me a decent starting point, but that experience that I learned from TikTok and kind of like the editing videos is really what helped me grow my account on Instagram when Reels got introduced. And, so that's really what it is today. And so my primary forms of content are Instagram videos and Reels and TikTok videos.
Do you work by yourself or do you have a team?
A very small team. So I have me, and then I have a creative director, and we have a part-time college intern as well.
Because I talk to a lot of people on the show who do this kind of thing, and it's always interesting to hear the stories of like, when do you jump? Like, when does it make sense to invest? Like, this is a real thing. Like, this is my business. And when you bring on someone and what that looks like, your first investment in a person, and like, when did you know that it was more than you could do by yourself and that it just made sense to bring someone on?
Yeah, my first, my first hire was really in fall of 2023. So it was later than I'd wanted. And, to this day, I think, again, so in addition to Shred Happens, I have a high protein, low carb pasta and rice brand, Kaizen. That's a struggle that we have. That's where I really spend all my time between these two. And so it's it's always challenging to invest to bring on new talent, but is always the right thing to do, because as the brand owner or the face of the brand, you want to be connecting with your audience. You want to be giving them value. You want to be bringing back learnings as much as possible. So any minute that I'm spending doing things not in service of them is what's holding me back. My audience wants to see more of me. They want to see more recipes. They want to see me give them new ideas. And so if I'm not spending the time to do that, I'm not serving them the best possible way. And it's a struggle. It's a big struggle.
Well, we have two big things we need to talk about. You have an upcoming cookbook, and you have a food company. Which does it make sense to get into first?
Well, let's go chronologically. I
Okay.
think, the food brand would make sense.
All right. So, I mean, that's a totally normal thing. You just decide we're just going to launch a, CPG brand. This is not my background, but sure.
Yeah.
How did you get into doing that? And, two-parter, like why? There are plenty of products on the shelf. What was the need you thought you were filling?
Yeah, great question, and very naive of us, that's for sure. But in 2019, I was a couple years into creating content, and that gives me, just an incredible privilege to try so many different products. I mean, every day, sometimes I don't even know how brands are getting my address really, but I get products all the time. And so, at the time, keto was really big, like, ultra low carb was big, and I had kind of noticed a pattern with a lot of products being made with almond flour. And, the one thing that I really loved, um, and I talked about cheat days earlier, like the one thing that I was having was the pasta on the weekends. And my wife, Madalena, makes incredible pasta. And I was always looking forward to that. And then I realized I was like, oh, like there really isn't a good low carb pasta that's available. And hey, everything's being made out of almonds. Like we should make an almond flour pasta. And so I won't bore you through those details, but we started in our home kitchen in Cincinnati, Ohio. We developed something that I thought was incredible. We then took it to, a college to kind of help us kind of redefine it and like, hey, how do we actually like, do this at scale? We had some limited, progress there. And then so we decided to call on manufacturers, and we ended up finding the one manufacturer that would, take a bet on us early on. And long story short, we, ordered all these supplies. We went to the manufacturer, excited. It's not coming out of the machine. And so,
That's a problem.
that was a big problem. And so we spent about 8 or 9 months just flying back and forth, just throwing money down the drain, trying to get this pasta to come out this machine. And, eventually we did. But by that point, we had modified our recipe so much that it was just something that was completely different. And I think at that point, we thought it was the best possible product to move forward with. And so we launched with it. And while, we had a lot of happy customers, but overall, it just wasn't there. The experience wasn't there, the taste, texture, that pasta experience. And so very early on, I kind of learned about a very important lesson. And so we went back to the drawing board. And believe it or not, at this point, this is in 2020. It's right at the beginning of the pandemic. We were down to, $500, I think, in our bank account at this point. We had gone through any sort of savings that we had had. And I ended up going back to work to kind of keep this dream alive. And so I went back to work full time. Somehow managed to do the Instagram on the side, nights and weekends. And we were continuing on with this pasta reformulation. And so we spent another about 18 months really just like trying every ingredient imaginable to make a great pasta that was low carb. And so we ended up discovering the lupini bean. It's an ancient superfood, super high in protein, super low carb, high in fiber. And that's ultimately where Kaizen was born. And so in May of 22, we ended up launching the first version of Kaizen. And then we launched a rice. We've launched a mac and cheese since, and we've got some amazing products in the pipeline. But it started as a naive, hey, yeah, we can do this thing. This should exist. To all right, I'm not really sure what we got ourselves into, and then kind of figuring it out along the way.
Now, was lupini bean flour something that was out there? Like, I don't think I've ever seen that. Is that something you had found and encountered in your travels and investigations?
Yeah, so lupini beans themselves are, a very popular snack in a number of countries, especially in some parts of the Middle East and Europe. They're just eaten like as a snack with beer or drink of choice, or marinated with like olives and maybe feta. And actually, I have a marinated lupini beans and feta recipe in the book. It's super easy. Takes 5 minutes. Super satisfying. And but yeah, that's how both me and Madalena knew about it. And but to get the flour itself, that was a different challenge. And so we had to move mountains, what feels like mountains, in order to be able to find the right supplier and import it into the U.S. and build the right supply chain network for it.
Now, when you say rice, I mean, is it technically like a pasta? Is it like orzo? Because it's clearly not rice. Like, is it
Yeah.
just like a very, very small?
Yeah,
Um,
it's a thinner orzo, somewhat thicker than regular rice, but the texture is mimics regular rice.
Nice,
Yeah.
better than cauliflower, perhaps.
Without a doubt, and that's where this originated from. Yeah,
Listen,
I
I
do a
could
lot
get
of
down with. I'll
collagens.
do cauliflower rice. Like
Yeah.
it's a thing, but it's
Yeah.
it's not rice,
It's
right?
not rice. Exactly. And look, our rice delivers 20 grams of protein, just 6 net carbs per serving. And I always say, like, if you can have regular rice, have regular rice. Like, enjoy it. I have it sometimes. My mom, I'm Persian, and so the
That's a
Persian
big
national.
deal.
It's a big deal. Exactly. Tahdig. I don't know if you've had tahdig
Yep.
before, but
Hmm.
it's the bottom, crispy bottom. I love that. And there's no rice alternative will get you that authentic, Persian rice experience. But for something every day, for something that's higher protein, lower carb, and low glycemic, Kaizen's that delivers something that helps you enjoy that.
Now, where can people find this? I mean, obviously, I've seen you can get it through your website. You're in some shops. Are you looking to do a bigger rollout
Yeah.
in retail
Yes.
space?
Yeah. So we've been really, really intentional about finding the right retail launch partner. We've had opportunities, but we're right now in a very limited number of retailers. A lot of CPG brands come in and it's very challenging. Retail can become very costly. The price of entry into retail is very high. The average consumer doesn't know to just get into, let's say, a Whole Foods or a Sprouts or whatever it may be. There's this concept of a free fill where you have to essentially provide the retailer with free product for a number of different, for everything that you want to get on the shelf, multiple cases, multiple stores. That right there is a huge investment. A lot of other more traditional retailers on top of that require what's called a slotting fee, which is, hey, yeah, we'll put you on the shelf and it's going to be $100,000. And so that right there is a huge investment before you even kind of know whether it's going to be a right fit. For us, we've been intentional. We want to go where we feel like there's a strong partnership with the retailer to really grow Kaizen and to make it available at the lowest possible price for consumers. But right now, we're predominantly online on our website, as you mentioned. We're also a top seller on Thrive Market or Amazon, iHerb. So we're in pretty much any retail online e-commerce channel right now, with a goal of getting into retail second half of this year. And we have some pretty exciting things in the works that are not yet fully baked in yet, but I think we're gonna get there.
We'll check back with you on that.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. The ordering food online is just, something 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, you wouldn't dream of. But now it's like literally anything you want, you can have delivered to your doorstep.
That's
And
incredible.
well, you also have a cookbook, which
Yes. Yeah.
is, about the time that this airs will be release time. So
Yeah. I'm coming out March 18th, debut cookbook. So easy, so good. And it's about 100, a little bit over 100 high protein, low carb recipes with a Mediterranean twist. About 85% to 90% of them have a Mediterranean twist, but they're kind of a collection of a lot of my favorite things that have really helped me stay satiated, stay focused on my and maintaining my weight loss, and have really helped me build the community that I have today. So I'm super pumped about it. When Penguin Random House reached out, I of course had this imposter feeling, right? Like, me, cookbook, author, what are you talking about? But it turned out to be one of the most rewarding things I've done. And, I really put my heart and soul into it. And it was an opportunity for me to also spend time to work closely with my wife, Madalena, as well. We made and tested every single recipe several times, and I'm just excited for it. There's a couple family favorites in there, kubide kebabs, which, my mom is an exceptional cook. And so I had a chance to work with her on that. And so I'm just really, really excited about it.
how long has this process been in the works? Like, when did you actually start working on the book?
It's a 2-year process, 2
Hmm.
years. And so, when the publisher reached out, it was February of 23. And they mentioned the kind of the time frame. And I didn't really believe it at first. And I was like, we'll publish it in a year. And my editor, Donna, who's incredible, she says, no, no, you're going to need the time. Trust me. I was like, well, I have a year, so they gave me a year to kind of pull the
Hmm.
recipes together. And it went down to the wire because there were so many things that we made that we didn't end up including in the book. There were so many modifications that we made after we made things that we liked. And then the process to print it and to, kind of work on the layout and the design, takes us to March 18th of this year. It's got me a whole new level of appreciation for the process. I mean, it's even the photography itself. I had no idea what went behind the scenes in terms of bringing the recipes to life and just how important it is, and just how we were very meticulous, thoughtful, intentional about just I want to say every piece of parsley that's on
Yeah.
a
Well,
photo.
it's so different. I mean, look at cookbooks 20 years ago, maybe, something like A Joy of Cooking, or,
Yeah,
even like Mark Bittman's How to Cook Everything. There were no pictures. It was just
yeah,
like, and there weren't a lot of stories or head notes either. Now it's like, you've got this story about, soups and how you feel about soups and whatever. And then you're going to get into it and everything is going to be photographed. I mean, that's so much more. And then that changes the paper. You have to have like a different
yeah.
type of paper than if you're just having like,
That's right.
here's my book of 200 recipes with zero
Yeah,
photos.
exactly. The visual aspect of the book is really important to the audience as well. I mean, that's probably the number one question that I've gotten. Does the book have photos for every recipe? And so I think most cookbooks have it for about 50-60%. Mine, I think about 8 or 9 out of 10 have it.
It's a lot.
A lot of photos. The photos took a month on their own. So it was a long process.
And of course, you're making the dishes again to do that.
Exactly.
So you've already made the dishes, you've
Yeah.
worked out the recipe, you got it where
Several
you want,
times.
but now we've got to do it and make it look pretty.
That's right.
Yeah.
And still make some adjustments as you go through it. Oh, this part. And so, yeah.
Okay, so if someone's listening to this and they're just starting this journey, I mean, I guess watch your videos, get your book,
Yeah.
pick up your products, but any like really small things, because it
Yeah.
can be a lot to change everything about
Agree.
your life
Yeah.
as it pertains to food. So what's some low-hanging fruit?
I love that you asked that. I go back to the beginning of our conversation. Start small. I mean, literally, I have expertise in, trying every diet imaginable and failing more times than you can count. If you think you have me beat, let's have a conversation. I have you beat. I'd say the number one thing that I'd say is, look, we all want overnight results. We want it as quick as possible. The reality is you didn't get to where you are today, whatever that may be, overnight. And so I'd say have some patience through the process and really be in it for the long haul versus, something that you're going to do for a couple of days, a week or two. And, what that could look like is, just getting your breakfast in line, right? So for a week, just have an amazing breakfast in the morning that you feel great about. That's going to pay dividends throughout the day. You're going to feel more satiated, alert, excited about what you're doing. And that confidence will manifest itself throughout other things throughout the day. So my number one really hack tip piece of advice would be get your breakfast in line. It really will make a difference.
That's for me for sure. Yeah.
Great. I think that just and do it for a week, right? Try it for a week. Anybody can do anything for a week. And if it doesn't work, then maybe try something else. Maybe it's a lunch, right? I think today you're so much about fasting, not fasting. Is it 12 hours, a 16-hour fast? Should I skip breakfast? Should I not skip breakfast? Like, should I eat bread or should I not eat bread? How much protein? Is fat bad? Is fat good? There's so much noise. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I think it's like the number one thing that matters is consistency, because you can be a vegan, a carnivore, you could be high protein, low carb, Mediterranean. You've got to, above everything else, the number one thing is just staying consistent. And the number one thing is trying to find what helps you be consistent, because no matter what you do, as long as you're consistent, you're going to get the results that you want. But for me, the best advice I'd give, the number one hack I'd say is start small, like you said, and I'd focus on breakfast. Once you nail that down, you feel good about it, make whatever modifications, then go to the next part of the day. Maybe that's lunch or maybe that's dinner. I think for me, another big hack is in between lunch and dinner, most days I have some sort of protein, like 25 to 30 grams of protein. It could be like a protein smoothie. I do those a lot. It could be mixing some protein with Greek yogurt. It could be just Greek yogurt and berries. That protein will go a long way, especially if you overeat like I used to do at dinner time and then feel terrible at the end of the day. And then you start the day over the next day. Having some protein in between lunch and dinner.
I've gone to buying bags of like high quality beef jerky and just keeping that on hand and just like when I want, and also because I chew so well, like I eat it slower. You're not eating like super fast because like, it's like I got to gnaw on it a little bit and just like throwing 3 chunks of beef jerky on, on the table while I'm working on my computer and chewing on that for a few minutes.
Absolutely. And you know yourself well, you know yourself best, right? That texture is big for somebody. The amount of time is important for some people. It's volume. I need to eat a lot. So for some people it's, hey, I just need something sweet. For some people it's, hey, I need something salty, crunchy. So you know yourself best. That jerky example is a great one.
Awesome. Well, I put everything in the show notes. People will be able to find your social media. They'll find the book. We'll link up to your products.
Amazing.
And
thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you as you release this book, and I'm sure you're going to have a great reception.
I appreciate it, and I can't wait to try your tofu tacos one day.
Yes, I'll have to send over the link.
There you go.
Well, to all of our listeners, this has been Chris with Chefs Without Restaurants. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great week. You're still here? The podcast's over. If you are indeed still here, thanks for taking the time to listen to the show. I'd love to direct you to one place, and that's chefswithoutrestaurants.org. From there, you'll be able to join our email newsletter, get connected in our free Facebook group, and join our personal chef, catering, and food truck database so I can help get you more job leads. And you'll also find a link to our sponsor page where you'll find products and services I love. You pay nothing additional to use these links, but I may get a small commission, which helps keep the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast and organization running. You might even get a discount for using some of these links. As always, you can reach out to me on Instagram at Chefs Without Restaurants or send me an email at chefswithoutrestaurants@gmail.com. Thanks so much.